We're live. Okay, great. Welcome to our media availability. It's Monday, the second week. Hope everyone had a great weekend and were able to get up and thrash some pal. We have Senator Vickers with us today to talk about a nursing compact, and then we'll open it up to questions from the media. Senator Vickers.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And Senator Oakland and others reminded me that they've got lots of emails on this particular bill, not because it was controversial, because that's not really the case. It's been fully vetted throughout the summer with all of the involved stakeholders. In the medical professions, we found that by doing these compacts, and what a compact is, and it's allowed by Congress, that once you get to a certain critical mass or critical number of states, then you can form a compact. And the compact does a couple of things. It allows for some consistency in licensing and requirements. It also allows for that particular practitioner to be able to practice in other states within their compact. Typically, they're done regionally, intermountain states or western states, that type of thing. This particular compact, we have one in place. It's a nurse compact that's been on for a number of years. It involves 26 states currently. They found the need for some enhancements, and the enhancements specifically are that as the primary state, for example, a nurse that applies for licensure in Utah, Utah would be the primary state. And we would go through the process of making sure that that individual meets the educational requirements and the licensure requirements, and that information would be passed on to the other members of the compact. If there was an action for some reason taken against, disciplinary action taken against that particular individual, that information would also be passed on. So what you find is that you have a mechanism for individuals as they go practice in other states. Number one, they can practice in the other state without getting an additional license. And they also are assured through the process that they are in good standing. And you know, you've heard stories where a physician had come from somewhere else, came here, and they really didn't have a license or something. That isn't the case if you're within that compact. It provides opportunities for individuals, medical practitioners, to work in multiple areas. So for example, think about it as somebody on the northern end of the state or the southern end of the state, St. George. I'm from Cedar City, so St. George or Cedar City. I have physicians and other practitioners that work in Mesquite, for example, and also in Utah. And also, if you have an emergency situation, we often do, you know, we'll send practitioners from our state to other states to help with an emergency situation. They can do that without having to worry about getting an additional license. So there's real positive things in it. It's very well thought out, well controlled, and you know, like I say, and in these medical practices, and we were discussing before we went live that there's other practices that we've done this with, medicine. You know, I know that there's other practices that are looking at it, physical therapy. We haven't done it in pharmacy just because there really isn't the crucial need for that in pharmacy. We still have individual state licenses, but in some of the critical patient care needs, we have done that with.
Any questions? Thank you, Senator Vickers. So if there are any immediate questions on alcohol, we need to do those now while Senator Stevenson's here. If there are none, then he'd be excused.
Anything new on the bill, Senator?
No, I understand the governor made some comments over the weekend, but we're still focused on the outcomes of what we can put together that improves and enhances Utah's liquor policies, give us the kind of outcomes that we want, and yet allows the customer the freedom they want.
What's your prognosis on the Zion curtain removal? Do you think the bill will get through with that intact?
Well, that's part. I think that's one of the points in the bill. I think if we look at all of the points in the bill, that will determine the outcome of it. It's there are things on both sides of this issue that will work.
When are we going to see language?
Probably by the end of the week.
I'm hearing from my constituents that their real concern is the discussion of the forced 1% to 2% increase in cost. They're really upset over that. The state forcing price increases.
Okay, no other questions on alcohol budget? While we have Senator Stevenson here.
Can I ask you about the price increase? One question. It seems like that would apply across the board to both restaurants, bars, and retail outlets?
It would increase anyone's costs that are purchasing through the state system. We've been looking at a price increase, but there are some training issues that we need to cover, and we need to cover the cost of the training issues also.
All right. We'll open it up to any question now.
I'm just
Marijuana guy here today too, so.
Thanks a lot.
You mentioned on Monday, last Monday, that you were on track for 1,500 bill requests. They have to be numbered by Thursday. What's the number you're looking at that'll probably come out?
It's going to be close to that. I don't know exactly, and but we haven't any other indication other than that. And we'll see on Thursday what the final count is. Hope everybody understands that we'll only be able to pass a third or less of those requests, and but I guess if you want to open up another bill file, that's your prerogative. It's a matter of free speech, and we allow anybody of any mind to bring an issue before the legislature, and we have processes to deal with those issues. No other questions? Anybody
We
from
actually just
online?
got a couple questions from online.
Okay.
Dealing with medical marijuana. It says, why is there such a high hurdle for approval of medical uses of marijuana when OTC medications, like many NSAIDs, haven't been subjected to the same level of scrutiny despite potentially serious side effects of those medications?
Well, we've got the right person here to answer that for us. Senator Vickers, glad you're here.
Well, that particular question, that this statement is a little bit inaccurate. So you have NSAIDs that are OTC, for example, naproxen, ibuprofen. Those all originally were prescription products through the FDA process. So they went through a full vetting process before they became an OTC. Often, many of the medications we have today that are over the counter. When you say OTC, that means over the counter, you can buy without a prescription, originated as prescription products. And for example, if aspirin was discovered today, it would start out as a prescription product because of the potential side effects. So medical marijuana is a class 1 narcotic. And I don't know how many of you followed the course of the summer, but the FDA and the DEA considered changing it from a class 1 to a class 2. And there was a lot of interesting dialogue that went on with that. I read some letters during the summer coming out of some of the secretary's office and thinking that that was probably going to happen, that they were going to move it from a 1 to a 2. Now, there were people that didn't understand what that would do. I saw a lot of things on the internet where people felt like that if it went to a 2, then they'd automatically be able to prescribe. Well, that's not the case. What it would have done is means you still would have to have been an FDA-approved product before it could be dispensed. But it would have opened up some doors for research that we don't have open right now. You can do research on medical marijuana, but it's very difficult because it has to be a class 1 lab. And we do have some in the state, and you can also do it under the IRB, the Institutional Review Board process, which is a federal process. So if you look at Representative Dawes' bill and the funding, the request that Senator Shizawa has, that is a good mechanism in order to get that type of research done. But back to the 1 and the 2, it does hinder. You know, there's aspects of the Schedule 1 that the Obama administration chose to enforce strictly, and one of them was research. They chose to turn a blind eye, or however you want to say it, about states that have imposed marijuana laws. The challenge we have now is we have a new administration, and if you listen to some of the dialogue coming through some of the confirmation committee hearings with Senator, is it Senator or Representative Sessions, and his input has been that it appears that the Trump administration is going to take a different perspective. Whether they enforce the current law, they could easily just say, we are going to enforce the law that's on the books. And that's been his pattern in some of the things, in his executive orders. He's enforcing current laws that have been ignored. And so he could do that, which would really throw a wrinkle in everybody in a lot of different states' aspects. He's also indicated that maybe they're going to do everything they can to shut down those states that have chosen to go recreational. He's talked in some circles about a moratorium on existing marijuana laws so that no new states could come on board until the administration. So that creates all the uncertainty. But back to that particular question, that's the hurdle is, number one is marijuana is a Schedule 1, not a 2. And the NSAIDs, they actually originated as prescription products.
Now another viewer has a follow-up question. Can or will the state of Utah support a resolution to reschedule the drug?
We already have. Senator Shizawa ran that last year. And we even talked about maybe even resurrecting that and running it again this year as a possibility. So I personally think that it would be a good thing to move it to a 2. Interestingly enough, if you back to this summer, when the FDA and the DEA chose not to, and you'll have to go back because I'm going to paraphrase this. You can look up the exact wording, but they essentially said there is not enough what they termed valid research to make a determination that this should be moved to a 2. And when they say valid, they mean FDA type, double-blind type studies. They also said we don't approve whole plant anything. They didn't approve whole plant foxglove in the day. They'll approve components of the plant after they've gone through rigorous medical trials and studies. And so that was the dialogue that came out of that decision this summer. And so if you think of that, that's, and looking at those statements, that's what drives me to really push toward, the research component. And I think Utah can step forward and be, a real example there.
But I think Senator Shizawa, when he was here, said that I think that passed out of the Senate unanimously, that resolution. And the thought of running it again would simply be that we have a new administration, and part of this is education. And you need to educate, everyone as to the fact that I think rescheduling to Schedule 2 is a lot better because that research can be done. And with the new administration, a resolution like that may send a message from Utah that they ought to look at it.
Yeah. Well, I guess if Senator Shizawa does that, then we'll have 1,501 bills, right? Yeah. I know the president has mentioned about...
and 1,001 bills that probably won't pass.
Yeah. The president has mentioned, in his statements about, he trusts being able to dispense it in a current licensed pharmacy. The challenge is that legally we can't do that, because it is a Class 1. This goes back to that. And so there are drugs in the pipeline, and people need to be aware of that as well. Epidiolex, which is a GW Pharmaceuticals product, which is a 100% CBD product, will be available this year, it appears. And they have another product that's a 50-50 mix between CBD and THC that is currently being used in England and Canada. That's also in the FDA pipeline. That's a little ways behind the Epidiolex, but so there are drugs coming through the pipeline. It's just slow and few and far between because of the challenges of the Class 1 nature. If it was a Class 2, you would see probably 8 or 10 products out there that would be under investigation right now. But unfortunately, we don't have that situation.
We're very fortunate to have a pharmacist in the House, or in the Senate, excuse me.
I was in the House.
But you
Speaking of this is our home here.
Yeah.
Speaking of the House, it looks like they have rejected an effort to move the resolutions on Bears Ears and the Grand Staircase, opposing those monument designations to a committee for a hearing. Is that
Really?
something? Yeah.
That's a surprise.
5517.
They got a house, they heard it in House rules, but they wanted, the Democrats wanted it to have a standing committee hearing.
Where the public and everyone can
Oh.
participate.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what's your reaction to that, and what treatment will the bill get over here? Will the resolutions get over here?
Well, we plan on, as soon as they get here, moving them out probably to Natural Resources. That would be a committee that most likely would address those. That's not for sure, but that would be most likely. And then as soon as they're finished, then we'll hear those resolutions on the floor and vote on them there. We don't plan on changing any process to hear those bills
And why is
or
it?
resolutions.
Why do you think they need a hearing over here if they don't in the House?
Well, it's just our standard procedure, and I don't see any reason to change it.
We do have bills from time to time that get a hearing in the Rules Committee if they're noticed up, and that's not been uncommon to do. But I get the, to me, the president did this at the end of his administration, the last moment, with the stroke of a pen. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that process was the improper process. And I think it's kind of strange anybody would say having a Public Rules Committee meeting doesn't give the process and is violating the process, when I think the President of the United States actually violated it. And I think to do this the last minute of an administration, that type of significant type of thing, it was absolutely wrong.
Senator Davis?
I think that one thing is it's a bill that has status like any other bill, as long as it meets the process and is not railroaded through, so to speak. But it has a process that President Niederhauser has indicated it will have in this body, then I think that's the proper thing to do.
We try as much as possible not to circumvent the process or suspend the rules. I mean, there are things we do that for because of a spectrum of reasons, but I don't see any reason. Senator Oakland, would we need to
Well,
do something more quickly? I haven't heard.
I think there is a time issue on this one, but in the past, if we have had a timing issue, and it's important to get the message out soon, then we might look at it differently. I think these bills are moving through the process in the House quickly now. It could come over to the Senate very quickly, so timeliness ought to be all right on it.
You know,
Let's see when it gets here.
As long as the public has the input on it in the community, that's what really matters.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, we'll probably be sending it to the committee now. Whether we move it to the top of the second reading calendar or their resolutions, these aren't laws. We may do something like that to speed up the process, but that doesn't, it's still a good process. It's just we hear it before we hear some of the other bills that have come before, so. Other questions? All right, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Senator.